Well, hi everyone. My name is Gabi. I am a program manager at Microsoft, specifically in the EDU space. Yeah, and that photo, that's me and my dog Java. And then if you like what I have to say, feel free to follow me on Twitter. There's my Twitter handle. But yeah, we're all really excited to speak with everyone tonight. For this first section, I'll be talking about Power Automate. If I say anything and you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. So first to start, so thinking about Power Automate falls in Microsoft's Power Platform. So you have Power BI, Power Automate, and Power Apps. And so we're specifically going to focus today on Power Automate. And Power Automate really works to kind of bring a lot of the different Microsoft products and software applications together. So for example, you get an email in your Outlook and then you get a push notification to your Teams. Let's say you want to add someone to a document or do another thing that requires an approval action. You could set that up through Power Automate. You could pull Teams messages from Power Automate. You can send different data updates from Power BI to Teams. You could hook up your forms and send that to Excel. And you can also hook up other third-party applications. So Gmail has a bunch of different connectors in Power Automate. And so all of these are built through different triggers and actions between each other. So I'm going to talk through a few different examples. So the first one, so sending emails to Teams or your phone. So for me personally, I am bad at checking my email. I admit it. And so I like things to go to Teams. It's easier for me. I'm checking Teams throughout the day a lot more frequently than I'm checking email. And so if I'm getting important emails, let's say from my manager, or if someone sends a certain alias that I find important in email, then I want to send it to myself in Teams. And so the way I do that is, you'll see on the screen, the first little box is when a new email arrives. And you can kind of filter this on really anything that's listed there. Basically anything that you can write an inbox rule for, you can do that kind of filtering in Power Automate. And so the example that I have here was a certain email alias that I had sent to a folder. So whenever there was a new email sent to that folder, I did this Power Automate. And so I put that folder name there, and then I have it go to another little section, and I do an HTML to text, which basically, if there's a bunch of HTML tags, I want to get those out of there so it's actually readable when I send it to Teams. So that's a nifty little action that you can use in Power Automate. And then once I get the HTML out of there, I set it to send to my Teams. And with Teams, the easiest way to send to a specific user is to use the flow bot to a user. So it'll be sent to you via something called flow. And once there, you just pop whatever message you want into the box, you put the email address that you want it to send to, and it goes straight to that user. And then another fun one that Tessa was telling me about when I was showing her this was that you can also send it to your mobile device. And so the way that works is Power Automate has a mobile app, and you can send a push notification to yourself as well. So you can get it on your phone, you can get it in Teams. So really, everyone can contact you in any form now possible. But yeah, this is one of my favorites. Super easy, super quick. Really like this one to keep on top of messages. Now, approvals. So there's lots of things that you can use approvals for. So I'm going to talk specifically about posting to a planner, but other things you can do, do you want to approve when you're adding people to a team? Do you want to approve meeting requests in the more like professional sense? Do you want to approve time off requests? That can all be built out through this approval action and trigger in your Power Automate. So looking at approve posting to a planner. So Planner is one of Microsoft's applications that can be used for project planning. And so Tessa, Amy, and I all run a Microsoft Higher Ed student form, which we'll show you how to sign up for at the end of this. And so when we have people reach out to us at Microsoft, we to talk to all of the higher ed students, we want them to kind of go through an approval process. And so let's say we recently had Edge come and talk to us and say, hey, we need information for this new feature. And so we say, okay, cool, here's our form, fill it out. And that form content goes to us. And we can say, yes, this is approved, or no, this is not. And if it is approved, then it goes and creates a task on our calendar to be like, hey, like you're going to post a thing for Edge on this day. And so I don't actually do any of that, like moving around. Like once the form goes through, we say yes or no, and then it pops on the planner. So it kind of cuts down a lot of middleman action to be done. And so on the screen in the PowerPoint is kind of an overview of the flow. So looking at this directly, so the new response is submitted and you get response details. These two really go together when you're working with forms and you want to deal with the data. This will kind of output a response ID, and then you can just input that into your next Power Automate field. And then this is the first spot where we have the approvals really come into play. So we create an approval. So that's the approval that we're going to use to send to me, Amy, and Tessa as we go to approve or decline the request to post in our higher ed form. And so the approval is created, it's posted to Teams, so we get a Teams message and we can approve or decline it directly in Teams. And then if it's approved, we go and create a task. If it's not approved, we send a message back to the user about why it was not approved. So on the approval in the adaptive card, there's a space for comments. And so we're able to say like, oh, you know, we have a lot of posts planned for that day, like please choose another day, and reject. And so that will go back to the user to resubmit the form. Yeah, so that is approvals. A little overview of approvals. There's a lot to do, but this is hopefully giving you some ideas on how you can use it. Cool, so the next one is tracking Teams data. So I love using Power Automate to track data that lives within Teams. I think it's a super cool way to get granular data on how successful an event can be and really look at the metrics within your team. So you're able to send to an Excel sheet when someone's added or removed from a team, so you can look at growth of a team over time if you're managing a community. You can send to an Excel sheet when someone posts to a certain channel in a team. And then all of this can be hooked up to Power BI to really visualize the data that you've been collecting. And these flows are Power Automate's, sorry, so there was actually a name change from Flow to Power Automate. And so you'll hear I sometimes still call it Flow. Power Automate's definitely a mouthful. But so these Power Automates are super simple. So for adding and removing, there is a Teams connector where when a new person is added to a team and when a new person is removed for a team, you can easily just kind of add that to a table in Excel, and that will dynamically update every time someone is removed or added. So you can be keeping track of that. Next, so when a new message is added, again, another really awesome HTML to text use is here. So when you post an announcement in Teams, that is actually a lot of HTML underneath that. And if you pull your text out from that, it's going to give you a lot of HTML tags. So HTML to text is super great here, and I would highly recommend if you want to use this type of flow that you use that HTML to text, because it'll get rid of all of that HTML and make it much more readable. And then you can just pop that into the table. And then what you're able to do is hook that table up to your Power BI and just refresh your data as things change. So you're not having to constantly hook things up. You're you set this up in Power BI, you set this up in Power Automate, and then you can explore your data in Power BI, and all you have to do is refresh. And there are even ways to automate refreshing data. And if you are interested in that, shoot me a message on Twitter and I'll go into that. Data updates. So one of the things that I built out for the team that I'm on is we wanted to see where different data points were at and then get notified on that via Teams, because Teams is like the app that we're always in. So we don't want to have to go to 5 different apps to kind of see how everything is. And so with Power Automates, there are a few different ways that you can trigger one to start. Some of them have to do with like an event triggering. So someone fills out the form, you can push a button and have the flow go. Or for this one specifically, it's on a schedule. So like every morning at 8 a.m. it goes. And so with Power BI, you're able to add an action here where if the data is a static data point, so it's not a chart or anything, but it's like a certain data point, you can hook it up and use it in Power Automate. And so we have a series of data points that we want to know every morning. And so we use those, and I gather all those data points. I kind of skip a few here, but there are probably like 10 or so here. And then I use those as input and build out an adaptive card. And so adaptive cards are super fun to play with. If you go, I think it's adaptivecard.io. It's also a Microsoft product. You can play around with adaptive cards, and they're built using different, I think it's a JSON format. And once you get it into those, you can add different dynamic content that comes from those Power BI alerts. And then those adaptive cards are sent to me and a couple other of my teammates, and we get those every morning. So there's no need to look across like all these different platforms. It comes straight to our teams and we're able to check it out there. So that's another use case I think is really cool, and it's not really complicated. You know, you set up your schedule, pull whatever Power BI you have, and the hardest part is probably the adaptive card, but there are lots of samples on that website that I mentioned. Cool, so a few final thoughts on Power Automate. It's really a great tool to improve your own productivity as well as your organization's productivity. So a lot of the things that I have built out are really to help out my team and cut down the middleman on a lot of those activities. And so if this is of interest to you, definitely check out the rest of the Power Platform. So like I mentioned, Power BI, Power Apps, and then Power Automate, as you saw here. There are some really great examples and templates on the website for you to play with. Yeah, thanks so much.